Welcome to today's math lesson on 8.12d. Our lesson target is I will calculate simple interest earnings. Our DOL is given 4 problems. I will calculate simple interest earnings with 100% accuracy. Some vocabulary words for us to go over are the words deposit, principal, interest, time, simple interest, compound interest, and rate. So deposit means, in this case, we're going to put in money. Principal is the starting value or the amount, the initial amount. Interest is usually expressed in a percentage, so usually interest rate is combined. Different real-world examples of interest include if you're using a credit card for purchases, if you don't pay off your credit card in full at the end of the month, then the bank charges you interest, and that's how they make money. But then on the flip side, if you have a savings account and every month you put in money to a savings account, or even if you just put money one time, if you just left it there, you didn't touch it, it would collect on interest. So then you would actually have more money in the end than you originally put in. Time in this case, because we're working with simple interest today, is going to be measured in years. But time can also, in terms of calculating interest, can be calculated compoundly. So whether it's every several months, every half a year, every 3 months, every 4 months. On our 8th grade STAR reference materials, you can find the simple interest formula right here. It's I is equal to P times R times T. So the I represents the amount of interest. The P represents the principal or the original amount deposited, so put in. R represents the interest rate. But when we input R, when we substitute the R value, we actually have to convert it from percent form to decimal form, which we'll go over. And then T in this formula represents time in years. This first I do problem reads, Mr. Juarez opens a savings account with an initial deposit of $500, $560, and will not make additional deposits or withdrawals. The account earns 1% simple interest. What is the total amount that Mr. Juarez will have earned in his account at the end of 3 years? So for this problem, we're not just finding the interest earned on the account, but we're finding the total amount. So after we find the interest, we're actually going to have to add that to the initial amount to find the total. But we'll start with just finding the interest earned on the savings account. So we're going to start off by writing our formula, which is I is equal to P times R times T. Again, if you forget it, it's going to be available for you on the STAR reference materials. But this is easy enough that I think you guys can remember it. Next, we're going to substitute or plug in any of the numbers that relate to this equation. So we don't know what our interest is, so we're going to keep it as I is equal to, our principal is our initial value, which is the $560. So we have 560. Our rate is 1%. But remember, we can't put numbers in percent form into our equation, so we actually have to convert it to a decimal. So one way to do it is to divide whatever number is in front of the percent sign by 100, because percents are always out of 100. So 1% is 1 out of 100, which is the same thing as 0.01. The easier way, and the way that I think you guys would prefer to do it, is just moving the decimal point. So we have the number 1, the decimal point is to the right of it, but when we're dividing, we actually have to move our decimal point to the left, and because 100 has 2 zeros, we're moving it 2 places to the left, so 1, 2. In this empty space right here, we're going to put a 0, and then before the decimal point, we're going to put a 0. So those were 2 different ways that you could have gotten 1% as a decimal. Now back to solving for our interest earned. We have $560 times 0.01, and then we're going to substitute 3 for time in years. So if we use the calculator and we multiply 560 times 0.01 times 3, we get 16.80. So that's $16.80 worth of interest. So Mr. Juarez came up on this $16.80. He didn't have to put that in himself. The bank gave him that. Next, we're going to have to find the total amount. So to do that, we're going to have to add the interest earned plus the principal. So we're adding the $16.80 plus $560, and that is equal to $576.80. And that is our answer. So according to our success criteria, we can calculate simple interest. So that's what we did first. And then we calculated total amounts, which is what we did to get our answer to this problem. For this we do problem, it reads Randy invested $1,000 for college in an account earning 5% simple interest. When she withdrew the investment, she had earned a total of $550 in interest. How long was the money invested? So in this case, we're not trying to find the interest earned. We already know that. It was given to us, $550. We're trying to find our time because it was how long was the money invested is the question. So we're going to start off the same way that we started off our other problem. We're going to write our equation, which is I, interest, is equal to P times R times T. Now we're going to substitute the different numbers that are relevant to this equation. So I, being the interest earned, is going to be $550. P being the principal, which is another way to say the initial value, is 1,000. We know that the account earned 5% simple interest, but we are not going to substitute the 5 as the R. We actually need to turn R into a decimal. So we can do 5 divided by 100, or we can just move our decimal place 2 spaces to the left, and that makes our decimal 0.05. So we have 1,000 times 0.05. And since we don't know what the time is, we're just going to keep our variable t. So next, we're going to do what we did in our first equation, which is multiply. So we have 550 is equal to 1,000 times 0.05. 1,000 times 0.05 is 50, so we're left with 50t. And now we want to get the t alone. We want to move the 50 to the other side. So this is a one-step equation. To do that, we have to do the opposite or inverse operation. So the opposite of multiplying by 50 is dividing by 50. $50 divided by 50 is 1, so we can cross those out. So now we have t is equal to, we could do 550 divided by 50 using a calculator, or since we have 2 zeros at the end of the number, this doesn't work if the zeros are in the middle of the number, but both of them are at the end, so we can easily just cross them out. And so instead of calculating what 550 divided by 50 is, we're just doing 55 divided by 5, which is way easier, and that is going to be 11. And remember, yes, we can say t is equal to 11, but we want to be accurate and say time is 11 years because that's what the question was asking. How long? And it's not just 11, it's 11 years. The last and final problem I'm going to do is actually one of the you-do problems. It's figuring out what the rate is. So we are going to be working backwards again, just like we did for time. So at what rate would you need to invest $15,000 to make $3,000 in interest after 8 years? So we're going to start off the very same way that we started off all the last problems. We're going to write out our equation. So we have I is equal to P times R times T. And then we're going to plug in or substitute the values that are relevant to this problem. So we know that the interest earned, or that we're trying to find out, is 3,000. So we have 3,000 is equal to, our principal amount is 15,000. Our rate We don't know, so we're just going to leave it as R. So we have times R, but we do know what our time is, and that is 8 years. So we're just going to substitute the 8. Now we're going to multiply the numbers on the right side. So we have 3,000 is equal to 15,000 times 8, and that is 120,000. We still don't know what R is, so we're going to keep R. Now we want to get the R alone. We want to isolate the variables. So to do that, we're going to have to divide by 120 on both sides, 120,000 on both sides. So once we divide 3,000 divided by 120,000, and just to be consistent, yes, we can cross out 3 zeros because they're at the end of the number. So now if we really wanted to calculate this ourselves by hand, we would have to only calculate 3 divided by 120, but that is 0.025. 120,000 divided by 120,000 is 1, so we're left with R is equal to 0.025. And so now we have the rate as a decimal, but to change it to a percent, because that's what we're looking for, at what rate, and interest rates are usually in percent, we want to either multiply 0.025 by 100, or we can move the decimal point in the opposite direction 2 places. So instead of moving it to the left 2 places, we're moving it to the right 2 places. So I prefer that way. So 1, 2. So our equivalent percentage is going to be 2.5%. So at 2.5% interest rate, if I invested $15,000, after 8 years, I would earn $3,000 in interest. Thank you so much for following along in today's lesson. Don't forget to do your Google form DOL, and see you in the next math video. Bye.